For no reason other than this wander has to begin somewhere, let's choose the mini roundabout that forms the junctions of Tinwell Road, West Street and Rutland Terrace. We're going to be heading east along Rutland Terrace into town, but if you fancied a rural walk, 100 yards west on Tinwell Road is Water Furlong, which leads to Freeman's Meadow, along which a public footpath wends its way to Easton on the hill. If you're feeling particularly energetic, you can continue following public footpaths past Wothorpe Towers, through Burghley Park, which is currently being restored to its original Capabilty Brown creation, down a newly created footpath under the Community Payback Scheme from Pilsgate to Burghley House and back into Stamford. The whole walk is a distance of roughly 10 miles. Unfortunately, none of the offenders who built the Pilsgate footpath were the criminal MPs who committed fraud with their expense claims. Rutland Terrace was constructed between 1829 and 1831, towards the end of the Regency period, on 2 enclosures, one of which was previously a bowling green. Numbers 1 to 7 at the west end are stuccoed and painted white. I have a dislike for stucco, or render if you prefer, because it conceals the beauty of the stone it covers. Numbers 8 to 12 allow the ashlar stone to shine, and differ from numbers 1 to 7 in having balconies stretching the whole frontage of each property. Numbers 13 to 20 are similar to numbers 1 to 7, but they too, like the middle houses, have been left unmolested by stucco. They also have narrower fronts, which are compensated for by the houses being deeper. It should be said that number 8 differs from number 6 and numbers 9 to 12, it being double fronted, and number 20 differs greatly from numbers 13 to 19, as it is the end of terrace and had space to make a bigger property. Turning left at the end of Rutland Terrace onto Petergate, the bastion can be found. This tower is the finest surviving remnant of the 13th century town walls. Retracing your steps to Rutland Terrace, on the opposite side of the road is sited Hopkins Hospital, one of Stamford's almshouses. It was built for poor married couples and originally accommodated 4 rooms on each of its 2 floors, with the first floor being accessed from a rear terrace. Constructed in 1773, it was named after John Hopkins, the Stamford mayor at that time. An extension with extra accommodation was added in 1869, and in recent years the rooms have been reorganised with several doorways blocked off. Hopkins Hospital still runs as a charity and provides accommodation for Stamford's disadvantaged. It is administered for the charity's board by Stapleton & Son solicitors in Broad Street. Rutland Terrace has now turned into St Peter's Street, and we encounter 2 yellow brick houses, of which there are many throughout the town. These bricks are known locally as Stamford Yellows, and their hue provides a softening appearance, of which I'm enamoured. Proceeding along St Peter's Street, one meets the Territorial Infantry Headquarters. With its limestone facade, this drill hall is in keeping with Stamford's predominantly Georgian style, but was built in the much later period of 1913. Stamford British Legion moved into the hall in the late 60s/early 70s, when it was extensively refurbished for their needs. The refurbishment allowed many functions to be held in the drill hall during the British Legion's tenure. The 80s saw the hall's purpose change to residential and commerce. Number 11 St Peter's Street used to be a pub. Until September 1970 it was the Greyhound. In the 80s it operated as Vent's Wine Bar, and in the mid-90s became St Peter's Inn. It continued under this guise until 2001, when it closed and became residential. There is now no sign of it ever being a pub. Ambling past the junction of St Peter's Street and Kingsmill Lane of a morning will find the aroma of baking bread emanating from Asker's Bakery. Asker's is the last remaining independent bakery in Stamford. If you turn down Kingsmill Lane past Asker's, you'll meet Austin Street, a lovely, quiet street with much architecture to admire and explore. Towards the bottom of St Peter's Street, where it morphs into St Peter's Hill, on the left-hand side is the old Rectory, number 8 St Peter's Hill. This 1850 Victorian Tudor-style beauty served as the rectory for All Saints Church, which is located in All Saints Place, for just over 100 years. It was still a rectory in the 1950s, but sometime after this, All Saints Rectory relocated to Casterton Road. The rectory was purchased in March 2014 and has undergone extensive refurbishment inside and out, with the cleansing of the facade restoring the stone to its beautiful biscuit colour. There is fear the refurbishment entailed turning number 8 into flats, but it has been restored to a family home. On encountering the former Stamford institution, now Castle House, something seems odd. Maybe it's the angle you're facing it, but shifting your perspective doesn't alter the feeling. The entrance doors definitely taper upwards, giving the building a strange, unbalanced air. The institution was designed by Stamford architect Brian Browning, father of fellow architect Edward Browning. Their offices were in 16 Broad Street, and the practice was responsible for numerous Stamford structures, including the town bridge. When built, the institution contained a concert and lecture hall with museum gallery, a library and reading room, laboratory, committee rooms, newspaper rooms, and a curator's apartment. A later addition was an octagonal observatory and camera obscura housed in a cupola, where people could pay to have a view of the town. The observatory was damaged in a storm in February 1910 and removed. Initial research pointed to camera obscuras being quite popular in Stamford, as there appears to have been one atop the old print shop at number 7 Red Lion Square, and another sitting on the now closed Stamford Museum on Broad Street. But further research has cast doubt on these thoughts. The museum has stood empty since it was closed under council cuts in June 2011. It is, however, available to rent as a commercial property at the rate of £30,000 a year. Opposite the Institute is the open space of St Peter's Green, where once stood the medieval St Peter's Church. It may have been the first church in Stamford, and was the only one mentioned in the Domesday Book of 1086. Reaching St Peter's Callis, or All Saints Callis as it's also known, provides a choice. Should one head left onto All Saints Street, or right onto Sheep Market. We're going right, but not in the political sense, I hasten to add. Callis is a Stamford colloquialism, meaning hospital or almshouse. The current incarnation of St Peter's Callis was designed by Stamford architect James Richardson. Opened in 1863 as housing for the disadvantaged, the Callis was a female-only residence and catered for 3 women, with the last resident passing away in 1959. The previous building, however, provided accommodation for 12 women in the late 1700s. This Tudor Gothic building is no longer an almshouse, with its purpose now being commercial. At one point, it housed Robin Story's wood-turning business, but its current role is offices for Bishopgate Corporate Finance. At the top of Sheep Market lies the bus station, and at the bottom are the old waiting rooms of another bus stop. This lower stop is no longer in use, with the waiting rooms now being a solicitor's, but it used to be for local routes, while the upper station served more exotic destinations like Peterborough. Actually, there's nothing exotic about Peterborough, it's disgusting. The only good thing about it is the train to London. The front of the waiting rooms was originally a 17th century house in the High Street, which was later used as offices by the Stamford Mercury. The house frontage was removed and rebuilt as the waiting rooms in 1937. The Sheep Market, from which Sheep Market is named, was originally held in Barn Hill, but as Barn Hill became gentrified and residents found its presence distasteful, the market was moved in 1781. Sheep pens were erected on St Peter's Street and Sheep Market, as shown in these photos circa 1905. The market was last held here in 1933. Also in Sheep Market is the Golden Fleece pub. On a summer's day, this is the nearest Stamford has to cafe culture. You can sit outside and watch people head and return to the Meadows and train station. You can also admire the Wolfgang Buttress sculpture inspired by an Eleanor cross, unless you're a Stamfordian, in which case you'll probably detest the work. If you fancy a drink at this point, don't bother having one in the Fleece if the weather doesn't facilitate sitting on the pavement. It's nondescript inside. On your right, Castle Dyke leads to the Meadows, and the junction with Bath Row houses the only remains of the 14th century Stamford Castle, with this short section of wall probably being part of the Great Hall. In February 2013, this Grade 2 listed building was sold to a local resident. The asking price was between £20,000 to £25,000 plus VAT. Crossing Castle Dyke leads you onto Castle Street. On your right is the old Stamford Mercury office, now a Wetherspoons pub called the Stamford Post, which opened in May 2014. The Post is an open, echoing venue. Echoing with despair, I feel. The Stamford Mercury claims to be the longest running newspaper in the UK under the same name, with establishment in 1695. Diagonally is the London Inn. The London was closed in 2010, and in the years leading to that closure, although it wasn't the busiest of pubs, had an edgy character populated with colourful people. It reopened after extensive refurbishment, including the opening of the first floor, in October 2011, and is now a soulless experience filled with soulless people. A bit like Falkirk, really. Keep right at the T-junction and step onto St Mary's Street. At this point, the adage, look above the shop fronts for architectural interest in UK towns should be adhered to. This is only true for the south side of St Mary's Street, the right hand side as you face the church, so cross to the left side to appreciate the architecture. The simplicity and uniformity of the plain fronted structures stretching from number 14 St Mary's Hill to number 39 St Mary's Street hold great appeal. Built in 7 blocks and designed by Thomas Lumby, construction began in 1781 with numbers 14 to 16 St Mary's Hill and completed around 1785 with numbers 37 to 39 St Mary's Street. Lumby also utilised the same design for the west side of Ironmonger Street, which lies to the north of the High Street. At the junction of St Mary's Hill and St Mary's Street sit the wonderfully curved reflections of numbers 13 and 14 St Mary's Street. These two shops were the gateway for an intended grand shopping street linking St Mary's Street to the High Street. The proposed street was the vision of Stamford Mercury owner Richard Newcomb, but he died in 1851 with only numbers 13 and 14 completed. One can only lament Newcomb's demise, as if the other structures followed in the style of the first two, the street would have provided a most pleasing experience to the eyes. Instead, we are left with this abomination to the eyes, a car park and the back of the old Woolworths building. 3 doors down from number 14 is the former Stamford Hotel. Built for Gerald Noel by London architect John Linnell Bond, work commenced in 1810. Noel used the hotel to attract support for his political campaign, but after his electoral defeat in 1812, work ceased in 1813 due to lack of funds. It stood empty until 1825, when it opened as a hotel, to quote the Stamford Mercury, "for families of the highest distinction in superior style," or inbred aristocracy idiots as we would now refer to them. In 1983, after once again standing empty for some time, it was opened as Stamford Walk, a collection of small shops and businesses, and this remains its current use. Such a grand neoclassical structure is at odds with its location, situated as it is on the narrowest part of St Mary's Street, with its frontage obscured by St Mary's Church. It is said Noel thought he could have St Mary's Church demolished, so revealing the hotel for all to see as they travelled up St Mary's Hill, but this didn't come to pass. On top of the hotel is the sculpture Justice by John Rossi. Some say Justice is pointing towards Burghley House and is cocking a snook at the Cecil family, who own Burghley House. That Stamford Walk businesses have been permitted to screw their signs onto the hotel wall under the carriage arch, defacing and obscuring the stonework, is most upsetting. Opposing the east end of the former Stamford Hotel is the entrance to St Mary's Place. St Mary's Place is an L-shaped, cobbled affair which leads from St Mary's Street, behind St Mary's Church, to St Mary's Hill. Numbers 2 and 3 are fine examples of the utilisation of beautiful ashlar stone in Stamford. Once the home of the National Farmers Union, number 4 is a Grade 2 listed building, and in late 2009 an application from Agellis Hotels to convert it into a 9-bedroom hotel and 66-seat restaurant was turned down. By 2011, permission to change the use of the building had been granted, but in 2013, Agellis decided not to proceed, and number 4 was put on the market for offers in the region of £1 million. There's a link to a short video showing some of the interior of number 4 in this video's description. Abutting number 4 is the side of the town hall. Returning to St Mary's Street, numbers 22 to 24 are more fine examples of ashlar stone buildings. Number 27 is the Arts Centre. On its left is the Stamford Theatre, and round the corner in St George's Square is the Ballroom, which was originally the Assembly Rooms. These three buildings come under the arm of the Arts Centre as a whole. Number 27 was originally a three-storey house of coursed rubbled walls with ashlar stones and dressings. Incorporated in its 1794 construction, on the south wing was a two-storey link with the Assembly Rooms in St George's Square, comprising a lobby and a kitchen. The theatre was built in 1768 by Jeremy Whitley at a cost of £806. By 1871 it had ceased to be a theatre and became a billiard club. The theatre reopened for its original purpose in 1978, after refurbishment amounting to £75,000. Turning right past the Arts Centre leads us into St George's Square. It doesn't quite equal George Square in Glasgow in stature or location, being, as it isn't, in Glasgow. George Square actually does little for me, but as it's in Glasgow it gladdens my heart to be there. Even being in the awful Crystal Palace pub on Jamaica Street gladdens my heart, because it means I'm in Glasgow. This indiscriminate pleasure gained from any Glasgow location vexes the King of Glasgow and causes him to call me rude names.
The Crystal Palace, another corporate drinking den on the homogenised, hydrogenated highway to hell. Mitigated only by a fetching set of windows populated by the lifeless.
Sorry about that. It's in the contract that Glasgow must be mentioned in every erasedculture wandering video. But back to Stamford and St George's Square. The previously mentioned Assembly Rooms / Ballroom is adjacent to the Arts Centre at a 90-degree angle, forming the southwest corner of the square. In 1727, Askew Kirk, who had given up the governorship of his boarding school to concentrate on teaching dance, was leased the site on condition Assembly Rooms be built there. Stamford also possessed Assembly Rooms in Barn Hill and the George Hotel. In 1824, the Assembly Rooms played host to Madame Tussauds, where visitors could see effigies of royal persons and punch fuck out of the parasitic Windsor scum. OK, there was a little bit of poetic licence in the latter part of the preceding sentence, but it's what every right-minded citizen would wish to enact. The front of number 21, next to the ballroom, was refaced around 1768 at the cost of £100. The refacing was one of the conditions when the Earl of Exeter leased the house to Robert Miller. The work completed, Miller's lease was renewed in 1772. Number 19 has been described as the most distinguished house of its time in Stamford, that time being 1674, the construction date recorded on its chimney stack. Number 19 is also said to share a stylistic affinity with Linden Hall. The village of Linden lies 9 miles west of Stamford, and construction of the hall was completed in 1673, with masonry by John Sutton of Stamford. St George's Rectory, number 16, is slightly recessed. The Rectory is another Edward Browning design and was built in 1888. Edward, or his father Brian, was also responsible for the west porch of St George's Church in 1848. Number 16 still functions as a rectory, and if you wanted accommodation in St George's Square, also as a bed and breakfast. Turning left onto the lane running behind the church, we encounter the red brick buildings of numbers 10 to 12. Designed and built by Thomas Pilkington in the 1820s, the terrace is Georgian in design, though the red brick construction could, at a casual glance, lead one to think they are of Victorian period. Furniture Went Mad, who kindly supplies the music for the erasedculture videos, sent this further information on the Pilkingtons. The Pilkingtons moved from Stamford to Edinburgh in 1854, apparently because of a lawsuit. Thomas's son, Frederick, followed in his father's footsteps and became an architect too. Frederick specialised in churches built in a Gothic style. However, one of his first commissions was for the institution, a hospital structure in Labert, paid for by charitable donations in 1862. This construction became known as the Pilkington Building and can be seen in this postcard from 1904. When the hospital fell into disuse in 1991, rather than make attempts to protect the wonderful buildings which composed the three huge Labert hospitals, the council, which took over the land from the NHS, allowed all the structures to fall into disrepair and sometimes to mysteriously catch fire. At the top of the lane in front of you, slightly to your right, is the 2001 built gated community of Danegeld Place that stands on the old site of St George's Garage. Some may say community seems an oxymoron when juxtaposed with gated, but still. Last year I had the misfortune to visit the gated community of Burton Waters in Lincoln. In Burton Waters' case, the gates are to stop the residents fleeing. Lincoln is not a pleasant city, and their Usher Art Gallery isn't camera friendly. Turning left again leads us back towards St Mary's Street and the end of this wander. This video could not have been made without the help and kindness of Uncle Pete. Thanks Pete, you're an utter gent. Thanks also to David for giving up an afternoon to answer my ill-informed questions and for being a mine of information for all things Stamford. And as always, thanks to the Scottish Mafia of Furniture Went Mad and the King of Glasgow.